Something like 80% of all registered Republicans believe Donald Trump and think that it was Joe Biden, that it is Joe Biden, who is stealing the election. The election in which now every state has certified their votes and has confirmed that Joe Biden has won 306 Electoral College votes. 80% of Republicans still think he's trying to steal the election and that there was widespread, massive voter fraud. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? And the latest that happened, was it yesterday? I don't even know. Time just doesn't even matter anymore. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes any sense. But what was it? 2 days ago, Texas filed a lawsuit against all the swing states. What was it? Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, I don't remember all of them. But he basically wants all the swing states, the states that decided the election, the states in which mass voter turnout, especially of course in the larger urban areas, voted for Joe Biden. Texas filed a lawsuit, which was then supported by 17 other states, and as of last night, by 100 of your representatives in Congress, 100 of your Republican representatives in the House who we voted have signed on to this ridiculous and frivolous lawsuit that every constitutional scholar and attorney is saying doesn't have a snowball chance in hell. Over 100 elected officials in 18 states and New California and what was the other one? Nevada. These crazy right-wing efforts to create new states. That's where we are right now. We're creating new states, kind of like Confederacy, right? This is where we are. These people are supporting this frivolous lawsuit that every intelligent constitutional scholar and attorney is saying doesn't have a snowball chance in hell. So then why are they doing it? And how did we get here? Since the election about 5 weeks ago, we have seen Donald Trump and his allies and his supporters and the people who are afraid of him or whatever the heck is going on, we have seen them go to extreme and severe lengths to try to undermine the election. They have filed over 50 lawsuits against all of the swing states, claiming voter fraud, claiming 500 or 5,000 signed affidavits, and Kayleigh whatever her name is, Kayleigh McEnany, comes out with a big stacks full of paper saying these are all the signed affidavits that people say that they saw voter fraud in action at the polls. Trump is trying to say that the Republican poll workers weren't allowed inside the polls to help oversee the counting and the voting process. All of these claims have been disproven. Or at the very least, they have not been able to prove them. Donald Trump and his allies have gone to court more than 50 times in front of Democratic-appointed judges, in front of Republican-appointed judges, even in front of judges that Trump appointed himself. And almost every single case was thrown out. Why? Because they didn't bring the evidence. They had no evidence. Judges listen to cases, and lawyers present their cases, and they present evidence to back up their claims. Rudy Giuliani and Trump supporters and Trump allies and the Trump team have gone to court and said, yeah, there's been widespread voter fraud, unless they're under oath, or unless they have been asked to provide evidence, and they've not been able to provide evidence. If they had been able to provide evidence, meaning if this were true, if this were real, if there was really widespread voter fraud, they would have won some of these court cases, and they didn't. So how can we think that this is still legitimate? How can we think that this is still something that's really going on? How can we continue to listen to Trump and his allies say that this election is being stolen by Joe Biden when they've not won a single case in court to prove that? Because they can't. Because it didn't happen. So when the 50 court cases didn't work, because judges, thank goodness, we have three branches of power for checks and balances in this country: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And of course, we know the executive is failing, the legislative is failing, largely because of the Republicans in power who are supporting Trump at any cost, it seems. And thank goodness the judicial system seems to be the one checks and balance system right now that so far is holding out. Trump and his allies already lost a case in the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court just decided it was too stupid to even try to even hear. They threw it out. They wouldn't even hear it. It was the Pennsylvania case. They were like, yeah, no, this is so stupid and frivolous. They wouldn't even hear it. And most people think that that is the exact same thing that's going to happen with this lawsuit by Texas. But I have a couple things that I want to talk about as it relates to this and everything that's been going on, and Trump's claims that it's Biden who's trying to steal the election. The first thing I want to talk about is they've not been able to prove this ever, at all. They've not been able to prove it. They've been able to convince you and many of their viewers and their Fox News pundits and whatever is going on with the Republican Party and all of these attorneys general from the 17 or 18 states that filed suit with Texas, and all of the 100 plus House reps in Congress, the Republican ones who are supporting this. I can't help but wonder, what is history going to show about these people? Is it fear? Why are they following Trump? Why are they literally following Trump down the path to hell? There is not a question to anybody who is not bought into the Trumpism that they are purposely and mindfully and knowingly subverting not only our votes, but they're compromising our democracy. What is it? What does Trump and maybe Putin or whoever have over all these legislators that they are willing to sell out their country? That's what's going on. They are selling out the United States of America by not standing up to Trump, by falling in line and buying into these frivolous lawsuits. And I have read that they all know that this is going to fail. They all know that the Supreme Court is just, because it's so ridiculous, there's no precedent. What Trump is actually trying to do is ask the Supreme Court to throw out votes. This is what they want. In the swing states that this suit is against, they are asking the Supreme Court to make the states throw out their votes and instead cast their votes for Donald Trump. They are asking the Supreme Court to disqualify, to erase your vote. Imagine if it were the other way around. And I've said this in so many videos. Imagine if it were the other way around. Imagine if this were Joe Biden saying the election is rigged, and going to any measure to try to overturn an election. What he's saying, what Donald Trump is saying, and what his allies are saying is, we don't want those votes to count. I won. No proof whatsoever. They just don't want to admit that they lost. And so they're trying everything in their power, including, and this brings me to my next point, they knew these lawsuits were going to fail. But by the mere act of filing these lawsuits and continuing this narrative of election fraud and Biden stealing the election, two things here. For one thing, Trump is over here, Biden stealing the election, Biden stealing the election. Oh my God, there's so much fraud. He's so busy doing that, keeping you focused over here on his words, but nothing to back up these words, that you're not seeing in plain sight what's happening over here. And that is that Donald Trump is the one trying to steal the election. By intimidation, by bullying, by using the court system. And not even, he's using the court system not because he thinks he can win in court, but because he knows it bolsters his case. He knows that you, his base, his audience, he knows that you will believe So if he just sits here and says it's false, it's false, it's fraud, Biden is stealing an election and not doing anything, then you might be less inclined to believe him. You might be like, yeah, okay, he's just blowing hot air, but he's using the court system. He's going to court. He's using my money, because millions of his voters are giving him money, which, by the way, in the small print says can go in his pocket. But by continuing to not just say it, but to act as if, and to go to court even though he knows he's gonna fail, and to keep just making it look like he's fighting voter fraud that doesn't exist, by the mere act of going through the motions, he's making you believe that it's true, even though he and his allies know that it's not. They know it's not true. I don't know, maybe Donald Trump doesn't know that because he's insane. But most people who are backing him know that it's not true, that Joe Biden won the election. And he didn't just win by a little bit, he won by almost 8 million votes. He won 306 electoral college votes. This isn't it's not even close. Even if they hand recounted every state in the nation, that margin of victory is so big, there is no way it'll be overturned. So it's all just a circus. It's all just a show. It's a sideshow. It's a sideshow to keep you occupied, to keep you outraged, to keep you upset for a couple of reasons. Number one, because then you won't see what's really going on, and that is that Donald Trump's the one trying to steal the election. And the other thing is that when Biden does take office, it delegitimizes the Biden presidency. So basically, he, in these efforts, are making Joe Biden a lame duck president before he ever even gets started. And that's why we need to win Georgia. We need to take back the Senate. We need, if Mitch McConnell and the Republicans retain control of the Senate, Joe Biden is pretty much a lame duck president. And that's the goal. So that Donald Trump can come back in 4 years and reclaim the presidency and come and pick up where he left off. There's a lot of literature about how Hitler came to power, and I suggest you might want to look into that. I want to do a video on it, hopefully very soon. We'll talk about that. But Donald Trump studied the playbook, how Hitler came to power using very undemocratic strategies and techniques, and that is exactly what's happening. So that's it. He's basically just creating a sideshow to try to distract you from what's really going on right underneath our noses, and that is Donald Trump is going all the way to the Supreme Court to try to get them 3 of his justices he's banking on, and it's a conservative majority. He's really hoping that he has enough pull with them that they won't do their duty, which is to defend the Constitution. He's really hoping that instead they will defend him and completely overthrow the election, which is really what it's about. He really wants to overthrow the election and disqualify all of our votes, all of us who voted for Joe Biden, and say, no, Joe Biden didn't win. Even though, again, there's no proof. I don't know how many times I can say there is no proof. I have seen comments from people who say, yeah, well, they have all those sworn affidavits. Well, why didn't they hold up in court? Did they even take them to court? Why did all those supposed sworn affidavits from supposed witnesses who saw voter fraud, why didn't they hold up in court? If they'd held up in court, the Trump team wouldn't be 1 in 50. So here's another question I have for you all, especially those of you who are supporting Donald Trump in all of these strategies to take the election away from Joe Biden. Texas started out with a lawsuit. Well, it started out with just Texas and a lawsuit, and it's now, of course, 18 states. And this lawsuit contests the election results in Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So now we have 18 states trying to sue 4 other states because they certified the election. So let's talk about a certifying election. So the votes come in, the votes get counted. There's a period in which those counts are allowed to be contested, and that's when Donald Trump or Joe Biden can come in, or if they don't meet the margin of the state law. It was like, I remember reading in Florida, if the votes were closer than a 0.5% margin, like they were in the case of Gore v. Bush in 2000, they were 0.01%. I think like Bush was ahead by 400 or 600 votes. They automatically go to a recount. So every state's laws are a little bit different, and the Supreme Court gives the state the legality, the right to create their own election laws, basically. And so once all of the recounts and everything are done, it then goes to the state legislature to certify the results of that election. Okay? Once the Secretary of State certifies the election, they then assign the electors. So if they say, okay, well, the majority of votes in this state, at least in 48 states, it's the majority, the Secretary of State then assigns the electors for the winner in that state, and then the next step is the electors go and cast their votes for the winner in that state, and then it goes to Congress to verify the count, etc. But what has happened in this case is the deadline, they called it Safe Harbor Day, the deadline this week, Safe Harbor Day, for all states to certify their election results was, I think, yesterday. All states did certify their elections. Still, Joe Biden is the winner. And that means that every state goes through their own processes for validating votes, for comparing signatures, for throwing out illegitimate, double-checking voter registrations. Every state is doing that. Every state has processes for doing that to make sure that their results are legitimate. And that happened yesterday when all the secretaries of state met the deadline and certified their vote. And now what Texas is doing is saying, no, we don't accept that. We don't accept the vote in those 4 states. No, we just don't. We are not in those states. We are not the legislators in those states. We did not work the polls in those states. We are not the attorneys general or secretaries of state of those states. We have nothing to do with those states. But on hearsay, on the word of the president, we want the votes in those states disqualified. That's what Texas is doing. My question is, what happened to states' rights? So not only is Texas just saying, nope, you know what, we don't accept that. We just don't accept what's happening in Pennsylvania. So we want to go to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court say, nope, you know what, no, you're not allowed to certify the election for your winner, Joe Biden. We want you to certify it for Trump instead, even though Trump didn't win. I have traveled almost every state in this country, and in almost every state I have seen Confederate flags hanging across the countryside. And whenever I've had conversations with people, whether online or in real person, about the Confederate flag, they always insist it has nothing to do with slavery, has nothing to do with racism. Nope, it's about states' rights. It's about states' rights. The whole Republican Party the last couple of years has been, we're about state rights. We don't want big government. We want states to be able to make their own rules and their own laws. And we want states to be able to decide what's right for their own citizens. Unless they lose an election, apparently. When Texas and these other states have a national election that doesn't go their own way, now they want to hijack states' rights and dictate what that state should do. They want to completely disqualify, delegitimize the voters in those states because they don't agree with the outcome of what the voters decided. We had the biggest voter turnout, I believe, right? The biggest voter turnout, 150-odd million people turned out to vote. That's democracy. That's how democracy works. For decades, maybe longer, Republicans have been trying to suppress votes. Yeah, even longer, if you count slavery, pre-Civil War. The Constitution, the Founding Father, didn't believe that women should vote, didn't believe that unpropertied white men should vote. So poor men, all you poor men out there supporting Trump, the Founding Fathers didn't think you should have a right to vote. Women didn't have a right to vote, according to the Founding Fathers, and black people certainly did not have a right to vote. They were owned by many parts of society. So despite all of these attempts by Republicans to grab onto power, to make it harder and harder for those of us who showed up to vote, despite all of their attempts, gerrymandering, voter suppression, the electoral college that's in place that still favors rural voters over urban voters, and still, in essence, what it boils down to is the electoral college and the gerrymandering and the voter suppression is all about favoring white voters. And what happened in this election is non-white voters, young voters, women, poor people across the country stood in line for hours, braved putting themselves and their families at risk for COVID, and voted by mail. Thank goodness we had voting by mail so that we all could vote safely, despite all of the attempts by the Republican Party to make sure they stay in power by suppressing our vote. We showed up in record numbers, and we won. We showed what a democracy can do when everyone, or at least more people, are involved. We are taking back our country from the throes of a wannabe dictator who does not care about democracy. And the sad thing is, we're seeing the people who are supporting him and following him who apparently don't care about democracy either. We on the other side kind of suspected for a long time that they don't really care about democracy. When they pass laws, or they try to pass laws that majority of Americans don't agree with, when they're trying to take away Roe v. Wade, when something like 70% of Americans believe that a woman has a right to choose, when the majority of Americans believe that two people who are in love should be able to get married, we have legislators who are trying to prevent same-sex couples from getting married. We have a Congress who is so out of touch with what people really, really want that they have been desperately trying to hold on to power however they can, by cheating, by lying, by finagling, by gerrymandering, by suppressing the vote, putting it in place processes and rules that make it harder for people like you and me to vote. And that didn't work. Despite all of those attempts, it did not work. And they're losing their shit. This is a desperate power grab by a wannabe dictator. People who believe in democracy do not act this way. Donald Trump, if he really believed in a democratic republic, would not be acting the way. He would have conceded by now. He would have manned up and said, okay, you know what, bummer, I lost, I'll run again in 2024. And instead he's making you believe that it's the other guy trying to steal the election, despite not bringing zero, big fat goose egg, zero evidence to court. Do you think if he had the evidence to back up his claims, he would have lost 50 times in court? The system isn't rigged against Donald Trump. The system, by a tiny sliver, is working just as it should to prevent a Donald Trump from stealing a fair election and staying in power. That's where we are. And where do we go? What do we do? How do we move forward from here? What is it going to take to reach you? Those of you who still support Donald Trump, those of you who think that this lawsuit against 4 states is acceptable, those of you who still believe one person's lies despite the evidence that's in front of your eyes, what is it going to take to reach you? Because this is not going to go away on January 21st. A lot of us hope that next year will be calm and peaceful, but it's not. We still have 80% of Republicans who believe Trump when he says that Biden is stealing the election, despite zero evidence. Not only no evidence, I mean just not even being a real thing. Does that make any sense? It'd be like saying, this is a pen. I have no evidence whatsoever that this is a pen, but I swear to you, this is a pen. This is a pen. And I'm going to go to court and I'm going to insist that this is a pen. I have 500,000 affidavits signed from people who say that this is a pen. This is a pen. It's not a pen. This is a pen. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump is trying to convince you that this is a pen, even though the pen is over here saying, no, I'm a pen. You're not a pen. I'm getting silly. Anyway, as I see it, when you have hundreds of lawmakers democratically elected by you who are willing to throw their entire country and their countrymen and women under the bus for power, then you have to ask, when are they going to come for me? They will. That's why those of us who don't support Trump are fighting so hard, because we've seen it. We're students of history. We have seen these dictators and autocrats and fascist regimes who have been supported sometimes by the majority of people who eventually turn on those very people who supported them. Look at Trump's loyalty. He's loyal to no one. What makes you think he's going to be loyal to you? He's not. And so I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Martin Niemöller, German maybe? I'm going to leave you with this quote. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you joining me on my new channel. If you like these videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the thumbs up and the bell to get notifications of future videos. Thank you all so much. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep speaking truth to power. I'll see you next time. Take care.